Item number 5 is an ordinance authorizing approval of the proposed water supply agreement between the Vista Ridge Consortium and the San Antonio Water System.
Good morning, Mayor and Council members. I'm pleased to be here this morning to present City Staff's recommendation on the Vista Ridge Water Supply Agreement. I'll begin with a little bit of background information, and maybe what might be helpful is to explain a little bit about why City Staff is making a recommendation on a project coming from SAWS. As you know, SAWS is a city-owned utility. Operations of that utility are vested in a board of trustees that are appointed by you all as the mayor and council or the governing body. But you've retained control over and authority over any adjustments to SAWS rates or any adjustments or any issuance of long-term debt. So that comes back to you for your review and approval. So any items coming to the council from SAWS get reviewed by city staff. We've got a public utilities function within our finance department. It's actually led by Marion G., our Assistant Director of Finance over Public Utilities. So he serves and oversees that staff and works with CPS Energy and SAWS on items that come before you for your consideration, primarily in the areas of rates and long-term debt. This one was a little bit different in the sense that we are asking you to approve an agreement today. So there was a lot of involvement from our City Attorney's Office, led by Robbie Greenbloom, and one of our attorneys, Gabriel Garcia, spent a lot of time working on this as well. So it was really a collective effort between Marion and his staff, working with the City Attorney's Office to review this agreement and the project and bring you a recommendation today. Now, typically, I mentioned you look at issues generally dealing with rates or the issuance of debt. You've got before you today the approval or proposed approval of a water supply project, which you don't typically approve. One of the reasons that's on the agenda today and we're asking for your approval is that anytime SAWS goes out and issues long-term debt, they've got to meet a Texas Attorney General's a bonds allowable test. It's basically a test to make sure that SAWS has the ability to pay that debt. It's a test that the Attorney General does. So one of the things that we don't want to have happen is that while the project's in the development phase is to have to account for that obligation in that Texas Attorney General bonds allowable test, because that would affect timing of potential rate increases in the future. So we don't want that to occur until the project moves to financial close. So what the Attorney General has asked is that in order for that to not happen until financial close, is that you all as a governing body, the Mayor and Council, actually approve the agreement in order to be able to put that in place. So that's why you've got the item on the agenda today for your consideration. Again, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, just some background information on the project itself. The water source is the Carrizo, Wilcox, and Simsboro aquifers located in Burleson County. This does provide SAWS the opportunity to get up to 50,000 acre-feet of non-Edwards water, diversifying our water supply significantly by the year 2020. The initial contract term is 30 years with an option to renew for an additional 30-year term. And really key component of this deal is that SAWS only pays for the water that is made available and delivered to SAWS and that meets federal and state drinking water standards. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just wanted to highlight a couple of dates. This has been a fairly lengthy process. SAWS originally issued a request for competitive seal proposal back in 2011, looking for non-Edwards water sources. That was amended in 2012, specifically looking for 50,000 acre-feet of non-Edwards water. What you have on the slide here are more of the more recent activities around this project, beginning in July when the SAWS board actually accepted the proposal from the Vista Ridge Consortium. There were negotiations over the course of the summer, which ultimately led to a draft agreement being approved by the SAWS board on September 29th and being forwarded to you all for your consideration. The city did hold a public hearing on October 8th, where we got citizens had an opportunity to sign up and provide their feedback on the proposed agreement. And then on October 15th, we went through a more detailed presentation from the staff side in terms of making our recommendation to support the agreement. I briefed you on October 15th on that, and then SAWS provided you some additional information on the 15th as well. Again, the project timeline, with your favorable approval today, if you approve the contract, it would be, once it's executed, we would be at commercial close. We would then be moving into the development phase, which can last up to 30 months. The development phase will allow for additional due diligence to occur on the project. The majority of expenditures incurred during this time frame will be incurred by Vista Ridge. There'll be some amount incurred by SAWS, but the vast majority of the expenses will be incurred by Vista Ridge during this time frame. And then, as we've talked about, we do have termination options during that time frame that I'll talk about in a little bit. Once we move to financial close, we would move into the construction phase, which is projected to last about 42 months. At completion of construction into the operation phase, again, that initial term is at 30 years. And then at the end of that 30-year term, title of the infrastructure, the assets, the pipeline would transfer to SAWS. At that point, the bonds on the project are paid off, but SAWS continues to have access to the water. We can continue to extend the agreement, but you no longer have the principal and interest on the bonds because they've been fully paid off at that point in time. From a rate standpoint, we'd probably be looking at City Council rate action in late 2015 or sometime in 2016, and that'll again depend on when we're moving to financial close. Again, on the cost, the estimated cost per acre foot, you see a range there for the infrastructure and the water between $1,692 and $1,959 per acre foot. It's a range because some of that will depend on the interest rate on the bond financing will affect that number. And then the power and operations and maintenance costs there you see listed, those are pass-throughs to give you a total price per acre foot of $2,076 to $2,343. If you look at it in terms of total dollars, it's just under $112 million, up to about $117 million in 2020, and that's based on 50,000 acre feet of water being delivered in 2020. Potential rate impact. The system-wide rate increase, and the big assumption here is that under this slide and this projected rate impact, this assumes that none of that 50,000 acre feet of water is being sold to third parties in 2020. This is SAWS taking all of that water and paying for all of that water in 2020. If you make that assumption, they would need a system-wide increase of somewhere between 18 and 19% based on projections today. What that means, and actually I see the title of that bar graph on the right should say average residential impact, so the bars on the right are specifically for residential customers. Today, the average residential bill is about $55.72. SAWS has other projected rate increases built in from now to 2020 or projected from now to 2020. Those deal with funding other infrastructure needs for SAWS, wastewater improvements, treatment facility improvements, the water deliveries or distribution system. So when you factor those in, the bill is projected to be about $76.12 in 2020. If you put in the Vista Ridge project and assume again that we're taking all 50,000 acre feet at that point in time and none of it's being sold to third parties, the bill would be about $88.22, about 16% higher at that point in time. I would also say that you're projecting from now to 2020. Overall, I would say that the projections are conservative. As you know, when we do the rate modeling, and many of you that have seen rate cases before as we've brought those forward, try to be moderately conservative as you look at those projections going out into the future. So I would say that these projections fall in line with that moderately conservative assumption. On key contract terms, again, from an infrastructure standpoint, SAWS will have to spend around $100 million to put infrastructure in place in order to integrate this water into the SAWS distribution system. That includes pipeline tanks and treatment facilities. Vista Ridge will spend about $844 million in infrastructure. That includes 18 wells, 142 miles of pipeline to get the water from Burleson County to Bexar County. The financing structure is $762 million in bonds and $82 million in equity. The rest of the terms I'll go through fairly quickly. I just want to touch on this one a little bit more. This is probably one that I've heard quite a bit about in terms of why wouldn't SAWS issue the debt itself? And again, it goes back to the risk component, the risk to the bondholder. It is absolutely correct that SAWS has an excellent credit rating. They are one notch below AAA with all three rating agencies, so they've got an excellent credit rating as a utility, which means they can get a lower cost of borrowing. The difference is that if SAWS were to issue this debt up front, what is being pledged to the bondholder are all of the system revenues. So at that point, it's like any other infrastructure project that SAWS has built. It doesn't matter whether any water is delivered or not. The bondholder is expecting to get paid. So once that infrastructure is in place, once those bonds have been issued, they're going to expect to get paid whether a drop of water comes down that pipeline or not. The way SAWS has structured this deal, again, is they only pay for water that has been delivered. So that risk has been shifted and mitigated. From that standpoint, the actual way that this is structured is that the credit for the bonds is actually the agreement itself and the project itself. So what the bondholder's looking at that point in time is the revenues from the project. SAWS is a party to the contract and would buy the water once it's made available, but there's a different level of risk there because there are no other revenues pledged to the bonds. It's just the project itself. So just wanted to point that out. We are supportive and actually very much support the way SAWS has structured this deal. They've also given themselves the flexibility at financial close to purchase the Vista Ridge bonds. You don't have to make that decision today. You go through the due diligence process in the development phase, but they've given themselves the flexibility and the option to do that. If they did that, that would lower the cost of the project, but what they would have to take into consideration at that point in time, again, how much more risk are they assuming at that point? So it's really balancing those things. How much risk do you want to assume when it comes to the bonds, and that's going to affect the interest rate. So I think they've structured this very well, and we're very supportive of the way they've put this together. Other key piece here is a termination for convenience options that are there between commercial close and financial close. SAWS does have the right to terminate. They would have to reimburse Vista Ridge for their costs incurred to date, but it is capped at $40.1 million over that entire 30-month period, or while we're in the development phase. And then you see a couple of other items listed there. If Vista Ridge terminates, they must reimburse SAWS up to $2 million for its costs that they would have incurred to date. Why the big difference between the 40 and the 2? Well, because the bulk of the expenses that are going to be incurred during the development phase are actually being incurred by Vista Ridge and not by SAWS. These others I'll go through fairly quickly. There is an operations and maintenance panel that's been established that the agreement outlines how those members are appointed. They play a key role because they will establish the amount of operations and maintenance expenses that will be passed through as part of the cost of the water. They've also established some small minority and women-owned business goal of 15%. SAWS does take ownership of the pipeline at the end of the initial term, and then once that happens and it's extended, the price for the water in the extension period has already also been defined, and it's basically equal to the purchase price is equal to the rolling 5-year average of the 2-year Edwards leases that SAWS has in place. So at that point in time, you'd be paying for water equivalent to the 2-year leases that SAWS is acquiring Edwards water. The development phase I mentioned can go up to 30 months, so that's a fairly lengthy period of time. So SAWS has actually negotiated and put in place an interest rate cap of 6.04%. And then in the event that Vista Ridge ends up issuing the bonds and there's an opportunity to refinance those in the future for savings, much like you try to refinance your mortgage, if you can get a lower interest cost, you do that. If that happens, SAWS would also benefit from that and would get 25% of those refinancing gains. And as I mentioned, they have the option, but not the obligation to purchase those bonds at the end or prior to issuance. So again, a collective review from staff, including the Public Utilities Office, led by Marion G. and his staff, the City Attorney's Office, led by Robbie Greenbloom and Gabriel Garcia. And I want to thank them for all of their efforts in getting this done. I also do want to thank Robert Puente and his staff. They've been very responsive to us throughout this entire process, providing us with information, responding to our questions, so they've been very responsive. I also want to thank the SAWS board, in particular Chairman Berto Guerra and trustee and former councilman Reed Williams, who also made themselves available to us, and we spent a fair amount of time talking with them about the project as well. So again, our collective review, our collective recommendation based on our review of the agreement is to approve the Vista Ridge agreement today. We also would urge SAWS to continue with the work of the Rates Advisory Committee that is reviewing the structure of rates. It's how you collect the revenues from customers. That's very important work that's going on. SAWS spent a fair amount of time at the last B session talking about that, but that'll be important. Those recommendations will likely come to you sometime next calendar year. And then we would also urge SAWS to continue to pursue those wholesale opportunities that could occur in 2020. In the event we don't need the entire 50,000 acre feet in 2020, whatever that portion is that we don't need, that we continue to have conversations moving towards potential agreements with third parties that could then purchase that water from us for a short period of time. That will help manage the rate impacts to our customers. So with that, Mayor and Council, that wraps up my presentation. Let me introduce Robert Puente, President and CEO of SAWS, to make a brief presentation to you as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Taylor, council members, Manager Scully. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. On behalf of our board and SAWS, I want to thank you for the time and attention you have given this issue. In the 17 years that I spent in the legislature, only 2 or 3 times did I have the opportunity to vote on an issue that I thought was truly historic in nature. I believe that the vote you are taking today will be the most important and historic vote that you will take during the time that you lead our city. SAWS has and will continue to have 3 basic tenets, uncompromising tenets in this endeavor, and that is to protect the Edwards Aquifer and to protect the recharge area over which some development is being sited. Currently, we have a task force that's looking into this, that's looking at our growth issues, our CCN issues. We want to continue to be the nationwide leader in water conservation. Just recently, 3 new innovative programs with a local hospital, bank, and hotel were implemented where we will show these continued savings in water conservation. We want to ensure a lifeline supply of water and rates for our ratepayers, and I will go into much more detail about this later. You can be the council that helped create a vibrant and local economy that will employ and educate our children and grandchildren. You will be providing not only a water supply, but a water security for decades, and you will be doing that at today's prices. You can be the council that acquired 50,000 acre-feet of water at a 30-year fixed price. This is the diversified water supply that we have been chasing for 25 years. The Vista Ridge project has many wins for our community. It will allow us to add to our underground storage facility. It will allow for operational efficiencies and flexibility across our entire city. But most importantly, it allows us to transfer risk away from SAWS and to the Vista Ridge Consortium. Whether it's blind salamanders, spiders that cause the stopping of a transportation project on 1604, any endangered species are risk that Vista Ridge is taking. Force majeure, an act of God, an earthquake, anything that shuts down the pipeline for any period of time is water that we do not have to pay for. If it's not delivered, we don't pay for it. If a new set of groundwater district officials decide to cut back the pumping of this project, then that is a risk that has been transferred to Vista Ridge. We only pay when water is delivered and when water is delivered of a certain quality. Yes, this is an expensive project. As much as a 16% rate increase will be needed by 2020. We are attempting to mitigate that impact by accepting recommendations from the council-appointed Rates Advisory Committee. Further mitigation can occur by potentially selling excess water to regional wholesale customers. You can also be the council that provided meaningful and enhanced affordability program for your constituents. We already have the lowest rates of any major city in Texas. Even after this project is online in 2020, our rates will still be lower than Austin, Corpus Christi, and Houston, even at their current rates, and probably still lower than Dallas and Fort Worth. We have retooled, repurposed, and enhanced our affordability programs. We did this through targeted outreach, direct mail, door-to-door, attendance at a lot of your fairs, and cleanup of current enrollees. Over 100,000 accounts take advantage of these programs that you see listed here. We have specialized programs for seniors, the disabled, and others. Any situation that you find yourself in, whether it's a divorce, a medical issue, a job loss, we can help and will help and have helped with our customers that find that need. The auditing and cleanup of the programs have allowed us to increase the budget by 75% since 2011. And in the next 5 years, we want to increase that by another 20%. The new Lifeline rate will significantly reduce the rate impact on qualifying customers. Voting affirmatively will allow SAWS to continue with our innovative, trend-setting environmental successes. The largest recycle system in the nation, first in the nation to convert waste gas to energy, largest storage of groundwater in the nation, the largest inland desalination plant in the nation that's currently under construction, international recognition on our water conservation programs. This project will allow us to continue our environmental sustainability. It supports and enhances the award-winning, only one of its kind habitat conservation plan. It allows for even more ASR storage, and it protects and creates more reliable spring flow in Hazen-Comal County, where the endangered species live. But yes, there is opposition, mostly from the Alamo Sierra Club and the League of Independent Voters. They want delay. But delay to what end? What is the identifying goal of delay? Do they want more information? If we do twice the number of public presentations, will that be enough? We have conducted over 188 presentations to neighborhood associations, town hall meetings, trade groups, civic groups since June. I personally have done 49 of those. Do they want delay because of a particular contract provision? We have executed certain exit safety ramps into this contract if we feel the need at any time to get out of this for whatever reason. There is a strong possibility that delay will send a signal to Abengoa and Vista Ridge that we simply cannot commit, that they will surely take this contract and shop it in the region. Delay also means cost. In this morning's newspaper, there's articles about the potential for increased interest rates. Certain things are happening. Our economy is growing. Therefore, interest rates could potentially go up. And so delay is also costly. Delay of this project means its death. They simply want to streetcar this project. There are complaints that Vista Ridge is simply too expensive and too risky. Yes, in February, I recommended to the SAWS board that they reject this project. And I would do it again today if it was the same proposal as it was then, but this is a different contract now. Through clarifications and negotiations, the yearly price escalation has been negotiated out. The $1 million reservation fee is out. And most importantly, the costly regulatory risk was negotiated out. Is this too much water? No, this is not too much water. And as Mayor Taylor said, that sure beats the alternative. Our 2012 water management plan shows the need for not only this 50,000 acre-feet project, but 16,000 additional acre-feet of conserved water, additional phases of brackish water, and additional phases of local Carrizo water. 20,000 people are moving to San Antonio yearly, and we need to plan for their jobs and for their homes. Our out-of-town visitors from the League of Independent Voters say it is a water grab, that we're draining their aquifer. That we're draining their aquifer. That we're draining their aquifer. So how is it a water grab when over 3,400 leases supporting this project and the local landowners are welcoming us as potential partners? SAWS, through its own volition, is increasing the royalty payments to the landowners from 10% to 50%. If there's an unexpected drawdown in the aquifer, the local officials have the authority and the regulatory ability to adjust that pumping. And this contract has provisions in it. If there is a reduction in pumping, we simply do not pay for that water. There's also been criticism of our contract negotiation with our partners, Abengoa and Vista Ridge. Abengoa is not using their own credit rating or their own balance sheet for financing of this project. The lenders, who, by the way, were at every negotiation session and had their input at every session, had what they needed to make sure that this contract was successful as far as approving any financial parts of this contract. The Texas Attorney General has to be approached, and approval of any lending is also part of this contract. Your own Office of Public Utilities and we have done our due diligence on our future partner, and we feel comfortable with this partner for over the next 30 years. Mayor Taylor, Council, this is an opportunity for this Council to govern beyond the time that you see yourself on this dais. I have the opportunity to know that legislation that I helped vote on and pass is still in effect today, and I still feel proud of a lot of that legislation. This is an opportunity to take care of our future water security, to make sure that what we're doing is good for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.